Thank you so much. It's great to be here today. So yeah, I'm here to talk to you about experiments that we did on reducing the impacts of extreme heat on summer greens. And we did these experiments all at Franklinton Farms with the support of the Warner Grant for Sustainable Agriculture. As Denise said, I'm the farm manager at Franklinton Farms in Columbus, and my collaborators for this project are Jerry Carter, who's an associate professor at Ohio State, and Tim McDermott, who is an extension educator at Ohio State. Jerry, who also happens to be my husband, he did a lot of the experimental design and the statistical analysis, which he loves to do. So as we all know, the world is getting warmer, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen a graph like this showing temperatures rising around the world and increasing over time. This includes the US and Ohio. 2022 was one of the hottest years in recorded history, and every year in the future will also be one of the hottest years. And climate change means not only warmer average temperatures, but also higher extreme temperatures. And this diagram shows why. So a small shift at the center of the distribution makes a big difference at the tail ends of the distribution. So more frequent extremely hot days, more of them, and hotter. And we will have more days with record highs. So as growers, we need to adopt new methods that allow us to mitigate extreme summer heat in order to stay productive and profitable in the face of climate change. So we did research from 2020 to 2022 on this topic, and we asked 4 questions over these years. We were fortunate enough to receive funding from the Warner Grant each year from 2020 to 2022. And so our questions were, 1, can we increase summer lettuce production by using either shade cloth, shorter frequent watering, or both together? 2, is white shade cloth better than black shade cloth for summer leafy greens? 3, can we grow spinach successfully in the summer by priming seed and direct seeding or transplanting it with the paper pot system? And 4, do caterpillar tunnels with shade cloth improve yields of summer leafy greens? So I'll go through each of these studies one by one in the next slides. I'll spend the most time on the 2020 study because it had the most interesting results and we followed the same basic design and methods in the other years. But first, I'm going to talk a little bit about our farm. So this project was done at Franklinton Farms. We're a nonprofit urban farm in the Franklinton neighborhood of Columbus. The mission is to nourish neighborhood well-being and connection through farming, gardening, and education. The annuals gardens of the farm total just about 0.7 acres, and we have maybe 1/3 acres of perennials. There are over 12 scattered plots, all within a few block radius in the neighborhood. So I manage the production part of the organization, and we grow produce for a year-round sliding scale neighborhood CSA, a farmer's market, and produce donations. In addition to our production farm, we also have staff and programs dedicated to garden education and neighborhood beautification. Here are a couple of our education staff, Morgan and Lavanya, along with high school apprentices at the Learning Garden, where they host open garden days, festivals, and school and adult groups. Sullivan Avenue in Franklinton is unfortunately infamous for drug and sex trafficking. Here are part of our neighborhood beautification efforts. So our volunteer coordinator, Jody, is leading volunteers in planting pollinator-friendly plants along the street. to hopefully change what Sullivan Avenue is known for. And here are some photos of our production plots, which are backyards and vacant lots. We use low and no-till methods and hand tools in our production, and we're not certified organic, but we do use organic methods and amendments. Our soil is a mix of poor fill dirt that we have to amend heavily where buildings were demoed, and beautiful native Franklinton soil, which is really rich from the flooding that used to happen in the neighborhood before they built the flood wall. And here's another garden plot where there used to be houses. All right, so throughout this project, we focused on greens because greens are among small farms' most important crops, and growing greens in the summer is a real challenge. Our goal in 2020 was to test cost-effective methods for increasing lettuce production during hot summers. So this is the question we asked. Can we increase summer lettuce production using shade cloth and micro sprinkler interval watering? And I'll explain what that means. First, we tested the effect of shade cloth. So we wondered, does lettuce grow better under shade cloth in the summer? We used white knitted 40% shade cloth. We suspended it on 9-gauge wire hoops, which we clipped, and we clipped the shade cloth to the hoops with little binder clips and removed it at first harvest. We started out trying to put the shade cloth on EMT conduit hoops, which are taller and cover 2 of our beds, but we decided we liked the smaller wire hoops because they were easier to set up and worked better with the height of the sprinklers. Here's a picture of what the shade cloth and the wire hoops look like close up. We also tested the effect of shorter and more frequent watering. So we wanted to know if lettuce grows better if watered via sprinkler 40 minutes just once in the morning or for 10 minutes spread out 4 times throughout the day. We used mini wobbler sprinkler heads on PVC risers with sled bases. So we had 4 treatments that we applied. The none treatment had no shade with watering once a day for 40 minutes. The shade treatment had shade cloth with watering for 40 minutes once a day. And the water treatment had no shade with watering for 10 minutes 4 times a day. And the shade plus water treatment had shade cloth plus watering for 10 minutes 4 times a day. So the water treatment is really, that's shorthand for interval watering. The none treatment and the shade treatment both have the total same amount of watering as the water treatment. And we tested the effects on 3 different kinds of lettuce. Direct seeded lettuce mix, which was Johnny Seed's All-Star Lettuce Blend. We planted it at 6 rows per bed and seeded it with a Jang seeder. We got multiple harvests off of the direct seeded mix. We also planted Salanova or Easy Cut heads from Johnny's Osborne and High Mowing seeds. We transplanted them at 6-inch spacing and also got multiple harvests off of those. And then we planted both full-size lettuce heads and mini lettuce heads. Full-size heads were transplanted at 10 inches. We planted the varieties Muir, Cantorix, and Cherokee. And then the mini heads we transplanted at 6-inch spacing. And the variety for that was Segolane. We measured 2 responses. So for lettuce cut multiple times, we measured harvest mass. And for lettuce heads, which we harvested at maturity, we measured the time until harvest. To remove seasonal differences and to standardize the units, we measured responses as relative standard deviations. So each response was measured relative to the other plants of that lettuce type or variety. Okay, now the results. The combination of interval watering and shade treatments clearly increased the total mass harvested. So for Salanova harvest, it increased by 90%. For the direct seeded lettuce mix, it increased by 109%. So production in both varieties almost doubled. So it was a very clear effect. And the effects of just shade cloth or just interval watering were less clear. Here we're showing the means with the actual mass of harvested unit for the direct seeded lettuce mix. The average mass of a harvest unit with no treatment was 3 pounds. With just the shade or just the water treatment, it was about 4 pounds. And with both treatments combined, the average yield was 6 pounds. You can also see the error bars around the mean. If the error bars do not overlap, then we can infer that there's a clear difference between these treatments. So you can see that both water and shade combined is better than no treatment. It's also better than just the water treatment and probably better than just shade. These pictures show the differences in germination between the different treatments for our first trial, which had the hottest temperatures for the experiment for the week after planting. It was about 85 to 95 degrees. So you can see on the left, almost no lettuce germinated with the none treatment, which is watering once a day in the morning for 40 minutes and no shade cloth. And then there's a gradient of more lettuce germinating with shade, water, and by far the most germination with the water and the shade combined treatment. And here are the effects on harvest time for the lettuce heads. The effects were less dramatic for this, but it could just be because our response measure was much less precise. The water treatment reduced the harvest time for some heads of lettuce, but it wasn't clear if the shade and water was any better than water alone. In these plots, smaller numbers are better. So the quicker we can harvest our head lettuce, the better. For Cantorix, there was no clear effect. You can see in the top panel that the data don't have a consistent pattern. At the second panel down, that's the Segolane heads, and they were harvested 12 days earlier with water treatment. That was a very clear pattern. Third panel down is the Cherokee lettuce, which didn't have a clear pattern. And then the mirror heads on the bottom were harvested about 5 days earlier. So to summarize our 2020 study, for harvest mass, which was the lettuce mix on the Salanova, the combination of the water and the shade treatments were clearly better than no treatment. For harvest time, which we used for head lettuce, water treatment was better than no treatment in some lettuce head varieties, but not others. Our best guess overall is that the combination is better than just water treatment, which is better than shade, which is better than no treatment. The small sample sizes per variety mean that the exact treatment effects are hard to estimate and small effects are hard to detect. And effects vary by lettuce variety. We saw the starkest effects in lettuce germination, again, at above 85 degrees. Our take-home message from 2020 was that spreading out sprinkler times combined with shade cloth can increase lettuce yields. And if you're a farmer or gardener, you're probably wondering how much it costs to invest in the sprinklers, the timer, and the shade cloth, and if it's worth the money. So here is an estimate, and these are numbers from 2020, so they've probably gone up. But for 4 30-inch by 30-foot beds, the cost at that time was $290, and the biggest cost was the shade cloth at about $168. White shade cloth is generally a bit more expensive than black shade cloth. The Milnor irrigation timer that waters one zone costs about $28. The 9-gauge wire that you can cut to make the hoops is only about $10. And you need just like 4 sandbags or rocks to hold the corners of the shade cloth, and some binder clips or clothespins to pin the cloth type to the hoops. I can also send you the breakdown of the supply list if you email me.
Michelle, how much of that stuff is reusable from year to year?
Oh, great question. It's all very reusable. Yeah. Yeah, the shade cloth should last like $10 or 10 years. And the sprinklers should last, 10 years or more.
Okay.
Or if they break, they tend to be, you can replace just one bit of it instead of the whole thing.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. In 2020, we used the mini wobbler heads, and this chart shows kind of how we put those together. But after that, we switched to using the larger wobbler sprinklers with the kits that come from Franklinton Farm rather than the mini wobblers on PVC risers. They both can work really well depending on your needs. Just the mini wobblers don't water as large of an area, and they can be really affected by the wind. So it's possible to make back the cost of materials within about a month, because the total cost of the shade and sprinkler setup is about $290 for 4 beds. And if you get 24 pounds of lettuce from those 4 beds at $10 a pound, you can make $240 just from one harvest. And you can get 3 or more harvests usually out of a planting, depending on the time of year. And you can do multiple plantings each year. On to our 2021 study.
Michelle, can we take a few more questions before we move on? We've got a couple in the chat, and maybe open it up to a few more. So Jonathan is wondering, how much did the seeds chosen affect the experiment? Did you try some of the seeds with no treatment in the treated rows, for instance? And how did you maybe select the ones you used?
Yeah, the lettuce mix is kind of an all-purpose general lettuce mix, not just for summer. We use that year-round. And then the heads we chose specific heat-tolerant varieties that are advertised to be heat-tolerant, or I just had good experience with them in the past. Yeah.
Jonathan, did you want to unmute and ask anything else on those lines? Good.
I'm in a loud area.
Okay.
No, I think you got it. I just wanted to know, like, if you tried anything, from the non-treated to some of the treatments, whether shade, and the intervals of watering, the 10-minute intervals, and if there was any difference there depending on what you use. But I think I got the answer from much.
Cool.
Yeah, so all of the treatments had all of the things. So we did the direct seeded mix with all of the treatments and all of the varieties of head lettuce and Salanova with all of the different treatments.
Cool. And so the other question that came in the chat was, what did you notice any like qualitative differences between the lettuce and the treatments under the different treatments, like bitterness or even appearance and growth pattern?
Yeah, good question. So shade cloth tends to make the lettuce less colorful. So it's a bit the colors kind of are a little more muted and less bright, and it's still pretty, it still looks nice and attractive. It isn't as deeply colored, especially the reds.
Any difference in taste, bitterness?
Not a strong one really.
Okay.
That I noticed anyway, but we didn't test that. We didn't taste test it.
Any other questions while we're paused before we move on?
Well, actually, I have a question, because actually I remember you gave a talk about this at OFA a couple of years back, and I
Yeah.
actually made the sprinklers that you have the supply list for, and I've just noticed like mine have had like the wobblers, like for some reason some of them just don't really get good effect even with high water pressure. I don't know if you had any trouble, like did you have ever have any trouble with like the sprinklers not being as effective, or like they just don't, like water isn't getting to the tops or something? Like maybe there was yeah, I'm not exactly sure, because like I sealed up all possible leaks with sealant, and I still was like 2 of the 3 that I built are just not really functioning.
Hmm. They definitely do get clogged for us, and you have to kind of you've probably done that before, where you just take the top off and then you have to kind of poke it, or sometimes I like suck the debris out of the
Okay.
little hole. That definitely happens with them. But yeah, that's one of the other reasons we switched to the larger wobblers, is because sometimes, they just don't put down as much water as on the edges, especially as you might want, or, they seem like they're just not watering the ends of the beds as well as I want.
Okay, cool. Thank
So,
you.
yeah, and yeah, that we also had some leaking in our system too. And yeah, switching to the wobblers has been less frustrating, for those reasons. Mhm.
Anyone else? No. All right.
I had a question too. My internet's a little wonky, so hopefully you can hear me. Hi, Michelle. It's
Hi,
Dana.
Dana.
I was wondering if you think the differences in the yield for the salad mix were because of those germination differences you mentioned, or if it was like after they germinated, you also saw differences in the growth.
I think a lot of it was the germination differences, but the differences in the yields from the transplanted lettuce, or the days to maturity for the head lettuce, also points to there being, additional benefits that aren't related to germination.
Thanks.
Shall I go on? Anything else?
Go for it.
Okay. So for 2021, we wanted to compare the effects of white versus black shade cloth for lettuce and spinach. We wanted to grow successful summer spinach using the shade cloth and interval watering that worked for the lettuce. And we wanted to compare yields of the paper pot transplanted spinach with direct seeded spinach. We germinated the spinach flats in our office, which stays at room temperature year round. So 70, 75 degrees. So the spinach germinated really well in there. And we grew heat tolerant varieties, lizard and space. Because we found in 2020 that the interval watering worked so well, we watered all of our beds in 2021 on sprinklers with 4 times daily watering. This picture shows one of our trial blocks with uncovered spinach in the front, and then the white and the black shade cloth in the back. This, I think, was our August planted block, which was our most successful planting. In June and July, the spinach plantings were definitely less successful. Here are our shade cloth results from 2021. It seemed like the white shade cloth might lead to higher yields over black shade cloth. But we didn't find a significant difference between the direct seeded and the paper pot transplanted spinach. Neither of them, unfortunately, worked very well. So you can see here, this is a pretty spotty bed of direct seeded spinach. We did half beds of direct seeded spinach, and then direct seeded lettuce in the back. And hopefully you can see kind of scrunched up back there, but the lettuce is a lot lusher and less spotty than this. And even the really well germinated spinach, it kind of became spotty over time through disease and predation. We had a lot of disease and die-off. I wasn't always sure, you know, what the disease was or what exactly was going on as the plants kind of died or disappeared, but it seemed like damping off, Fusarium, anthracnose, maybe, slugs. In conclusion, the sprinkler watering scheme and shade cloth that worked really well for summer lettuce did not work as well for spinach. And we'd still love to figure out how to grow summer spinach, or at least kind of extend the spinach season into the hotter months. And one of my questions that I'd love to figure out in the future is if drip tape instead of sprinklers can reduce the humidity and spinach disease while still cooling the soil sufficiently to have successful summer spinach. I'm gonna go on to 2022 unless there are any questions about 2021 first. Good to go? Okay.
I was going to say, I'll be interested in that last part that you said about the drip tape too. If you decide to do that, or yeah, if there's any interest, I'd love to know that. And then also kind of think about, what about any like covering or on the ground, like wood chip, straw, something like that to maybe help with some of the cooling. And then with the drip tape, yeah, I'd be interested to know that as well, if you all decide to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Good question. So in 2022, we wanted to see if caterpillar tunnels covered with shade cloth could improve the yields of summer leafy greens. So we compared yields of summer lettuce mix from caterpillar tunnels covered with 50% black shade cloth, which is really what's most available for covering tunnels. It comes in varying percentages, but the black shade cloth is what's most available. And versus outside plantings that were uncovered and outside plantings covered with wire hoops and shade cloth. So Farmer's Friend, which sells the caterpillar tunnels we bought, they say everything grows better in a tunnel. And I wonder if that's true. That was one of the impetuses for this study. And while caterpillar tunnels are clearly helpful for mitigating increasingly extreme rainfall events that we see from climate change, I wasn't sure how well they do in the heat for especially heat sensitive crops. Here are 3 of our Farmer's Friend high tunnels that we put up in 2021. These were mostly paid for with the cost share program from NRCS Equip. They're 14 by 50 feet. They cost about $2,200, and you can also purchase an overhead sprinkler irrigation kit that hangs from the hoops from Farmer's Friend, also for about $364 per tunnel. So our methods for 2022 were to compare yields with no shade versus the shade over the tunnel. And we had trial plantings in 2 different tunnels. Again, we watered all of these beds with sprinklers 4 times daily. So for us, the shade cloth covered tunnels did not work well. We had an average yield of about 1 standard deviation lower in the tunnels actually than our outside plant. There wasn't a clear difference last year between outdoor plantings with and without shade cloth. So it seems like shade cloth covered caterpillar tunnels are not a reliably better choice for growing summer greens successfully in central Ohio. And of course, they're still a great investment for summer tomatoes and winter greens. At least for us, they didn't work very well they didn't work well at all for growing summer greens. We saw increased pest pressure in the tunnels. So we saw cutworms, we saw whiteflies. We think maybe the pests overwintered more successfully or extended their breeding season. Not sure if there's been any research on pest pressure in tunnels, but that would be interesting to know about if anybody has information there. And it's also possible that the summer tunnel environment, even with the shade cloth, can increase heat stress on sensitive crops, making the crops more susceptible to disease pressure and pest pressure. Again, we'd love to see experiments like this done at other sites because our trials just had 2 tunnels, and we know that other growers in other parts of the country have success growing greens in summer tunnels. So conclusions from 2020 to 2022, our best summer lettuce yields came from direct seeded lettuce with sprinklers on timers watered 4 times daily and shade cloth. Shade cloth, especially white shade cloth, is probably helpful. We'd love to try drip tape with summer spinach, and tunnels reduced yields in greens, but more replication is needed. These 3 years of research were funded by the Paul C. and Edna H. Warner Endowment Fund for Sustainable Ag. So thank you so much to them for funding us. And I also want to thank everyone at Franklinton Farms who helped harvest, plant, weed, weigh, and record all the greens, especially Nick, Tess, and Katya. Nick is also here today as a representative from NSAC. Hi, Nick. All right, so that's all I have. I have questions for you. So feel free to email me. My email is there. I'd love to know if anyone else has success or failures growing summer greens using these or different methods. And for academics out there, if you've seen other research on this, I'd love to know about it. And with that, yeah, any other questions? I'd love to try to answer them.
There was another question from Dana in the chat while you were talking. Did you track the temperature in the tunnels during any of these experiments?
Great question. I had Inkbird data loggers, which measure temperature and humidity. And one of them failed. They're pretty cheap. I originally was gonna spend a lot more money on loggers, and they weren't going to be available until too late in the season. I just decided, oh, these $20 ones seem good too. They'll probably work. And yeah, one of them failed. So I don't have that information, but it would be good.
Did it seem like it was a lot hotter in the tunnel than it was in the field? So Michelle, when you were, I'm just wondering, like, I guess I was wondering if, because I've seen like some growers also just remove their plastic and put on shade cloth.
Yeah.
And I know it doesn't like quite address like the rain issue in keeping the plants dry, but was wondering, well, you know, what kind of effect you would see on temperature with that versus, especially with the cat tunnels where it's kind of easy to do that.
Yeah, I think about that too, and I think that would be really cool to try, especially for spinach, where it seems like there's this issue with humidity, breeding disease if the shade cloth is low above the crop. And when I gave the talk at OFA, there was somebody in the audience who talked about having good success with spinach in the summer, and she had like a permanent shade structure with the shade cloth up high. It was more of a square frame, it sounded like, but would probably be really similar in functionality to shade cloth on caterpillar tunnels without the plastic. So yeah, I would love to try that too.
Other questions for Michelle or comments, things that you've tried? Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, good to see this work, and I'm excited, having been through a couple of rounds of running the Warner Grant program and trying to get people excited about submitting projects. It looks like this work came together really well. And I'm just wondering if you have any reflections or things to share with the group on those projects. Usually have interactions with Ohio State research folks, extension folks, what roles they played and what lessons you might learn about making that partnership successful.
Yeah, it's really helpful to be married to a scientist. Unfortunately, not everybody has that situation. So yeah, I feel like that's just coincidental, and if that wasn't the case, it would be a lot harder to, know how to design an experiment well, and how to analyze the data. But yeah, of course, we worked with Tim from Extension, and he's very accessible and available and helpful also. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard. It's hard, I think, to form those relationships between sort of academics and farmers, researchers and farmers. I'm not sure what the answer is there.
That's a question we're trying to figure out with this group. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the temperature and, possibly the insects overwintering. That seems like a pretty good hypothesis to me. I know we have had some research looking at microbial activity in hoop houses and versus open field, and they did see an increase in activity in that area, but I don't know that anyone's tested that on insects, but seemed pretty plausible to me. So yeah. Any other questions, comments for Michelle? Ideas?
Deb, sorry, I was on mute. If you haven't interacted with Matt Kleinhentz, certainly on the organic high tunnel production, he would be my go-to person for vegetables. I don't know that he's done lettuce per se, but he has a lot of experience about what goes on, at least in the high tunnels. Now, the shade and all of that, I not in the time that I worked with Matt. But it occurs to me that what you guys have started here, if you're interested, and especially your husband, what department is he in?
He's in EEOB, so he actually studies bats and their relationships with each other.
Okay.
So quite unrelated.
Okay, yeah, but he knows his statistics and all. Right.
Yes. Yeah,
Well, this would be the fantastic seed project for a larger SARE, certainly, farmer research project where you mentioned wanting to know about other, people doing the same thing in other areas. So that's just one thought. You've got really good preliminary data here. You know, you've already got established relationships. You would need a scientist to work with you. Well, not for the on farm, and Sean could probably tell you all about that. The other thing, as you first started talking, I was thinking, I know you said you're not certified, but boy, if you were and you really wanted to expand this in a significant way, using, just like you set up the question, the climate change, you know, issue front and center, this could be a fantastic OREI, which is the Organic Research and Education Initiative within, you know, we're talking big money there. And you definitely need a very, very strong academic leader, but you've got the preliminary data. And if you have connections with growers and, you know, other regions in Ohio, but even, you know, beyond that, it's just a couple of thoughts. It's fantastic project, Michelle.
Thank you.
And I can really see this having legs and growing and being a showcase for this group, is, you know, with the right connections.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
I was just going to
Yes, I
add,
would love that.
Matt has definitely done work in season extension with lettuce and greens. So he wanted to be here today, but he had another meeting.
Yeah, I talked to him quite a bit at the workshop,
Awesome.
at the OFR conference. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's what we wanted. So
Yeah, and I'd been to a grafting workshop that he put on before, which was really
I put in the chat as well. There's a new person who's actually just arrived, but officially starts in August, who's going to have this urban ag portfolio for our horticulture and crop science department. And
wow.
she's young and great and interested, and I think it'd be neat to connect you guys just to have her get a sense of what you're doing. And if there's others on the call here who want to do these kinds of things, I can help broker those contacts. So
I think that is perfect, like what you guys are all saying, to highlight what the intention of our network is all about, is to take, you know, an individual's idea and connect it with others that have that same interest and idea, to build a small trial into a bigger trial and do it in different places. And I agree that this does have legs. This is exciting. And I know there's people on our call right now that are also trying to grow lettuce and spinach and greens in the summer, plus more that aren't on the call today. And behind the scenes, Cassie and Julie and I have been talking about how do we take some of this stuff and then create mini groups, like sub working groups, to push some of these ideas forward. And whether it's this specifically or some of the other ideas that came out of our workshop in February too. Because we have a few projects that really do have legs and some great potential funding sources, like what you mentioned, Deb. So we see this as where this network is going and growing as well.
We got funding from SARE to do winter greens research for this year. So I'm actually on maternity leave right now. So through July, didn't want to do any summer projects this year, but we're going to be doing some variety trials for winter greens this year, funded by a SARE farmer grant.
Great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Nice.
I have another granular question about the growing methods, if that's okay to zoom back into that. Okay. I was wondering also, Michelle, if you have used any of the like white or reflective landscape fabrics or mulches down on the beds.
No.
And I've seen more of those, especially used in summer tunnel production. I know Nolt sells white landscape fabric. And just wondering if that would also have like a beneficial effect and provide some weed control.
Yeah, that would be super interesting, I think, to look at. And I heard from on some podcast with Ray Tyler, who's a really successful greens grower in the South, that even black landscape fabric with drip tape underneath cools the soil as well. But yeah, I'm sure white obviously would be even better for that. So that would be really cool to look at, I think.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. That's good to know that even the black does with the drip. Yeah, cool. Ray grows a lot. He grows all of his greens in tunnels,
Yes.
I think through the summer, right? In Tennessee. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, cool. Thanks.
Well, Michelle has shared her contact information with everyone to continue talking further. And I do agree with the note that Doug dropped in the chat of building the connections and lists of people that are interested in furthering that specifically, looking at opportunities and just continuing to talk about what might work for you that you've tried as well. So all very, very good. And speaking of collaboration and talking to each other, Practical Farmers of Iowa has a collaborative project that we found out about, and we're really interested in learning more and having this group hear about it to see how we might be able to adopt some of the things that they're doing and see if it works for our network and works in Ohio as well. So next month's program is at noon. It's on the 6th of July, same link as you have now. And continue to spread the word about the network. If there's people you know that you think might be interested, share this with them, because we do want to keep building this network. And like I said, as we build the network, we find out that we have a lot of specialties within the network, and people start talking to each other with those common interests, which is really exciting for us to see. So if nobody has any more questions or thoughts to share, I know everybody's excited about getting back out into the hot weather, but we might say goodbye until next month on this platform, but keep talking to each other.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you so much,
Thank you.
Michelle. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.